Hello, in this video I'm going to show you how you might pull down data from a web API and put it into your game. So in this example I'm going to use this API that Steam provides where it allows us to pull the news feed for any game, and this game in particular is going to be Team Fortress 2. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's see, I'm going to go ahead and create a new game object, and I'm just going to call it TF2, and I will go ahead and create a script for that as well. TF2, there we go. And I'll just drag that right onto my game object here. And I'm going to go ahead and open that script. Okay, I'm going to delete these because I don't really need those right now, and I'm going to add a using directive for the perspective namespace, which gets us access to API Buddy. Now, real briefly, I just want to show you the data that I'm going to pull from this JSON news feed. So you can the structure of this JSON element is that it's got an app news element at the top, and then it's got an array of these news item elements, and then each news item element, each news item object has a bunch of data, but the data that I'm going to pull is the title and the URL, and I guess I'll call the contents as well. And so let me show you how you would get that set up. So the first thing we need to do is create a class object to kind of represent that JSON object. So here's how you do it. I'm just going to create a public class, and I'm going to call it TF2 news. Alright, and just looking at the JSON feed here, I'm going to do it from the bottom up because this is the data that I'm really interested in. So this JSON object here, the curly brackets, it represents the JSON object, and so we will represent that with a class in our file as well. So we'll just call this, since this is a news item, I'm just going to call this, give this class the name of news item, and it will extend from API Buddy dot web response data, and actually this top level class should also extend from that. API Buddy web response data, and that's an abstract class that just tells API Buddy that it needs to populate the fields in this class. Right. So this news item, we said we wanted to pull the title, the URL, and the contents. So I'm just going to define those fields here in my class. The element names in your class do need to match exactly with case sensitivity and everything the element names in the JSON definition, just so that API Buddy knows, can look at the JSON feed and populate the fields correctly. So I'm going to create a public string and call it title. There we go. And another one for URL. And another one for contents. Alright. Okay, so we've got this object represented, and now we need to represent an array of these objects. And this array of news items is actually inside of another object here that we can see is this app news object. So I'm going to represent this app news object and put an array of news items in it. Public class app news. The actual name of your class doesn't matter, it's just the field names in the class that matter. So it needs to extend from API Buddy dot web response data, and this will just have an array of news items. And I do need to make that a public field. Let's make sure that I got that exactly. That looks correct. Okay, and then finally, we need to represent this app news element so that API Buddy will go in and fill that in with our data. So public app news, I believe. Yep, that's correct. There we go. So that's about it for defining our class of that we need to tells API Buddy what data we want to pull in. You notice we didn't have to use every single field. We just used the ones we wanted, and we just matched the structure of the JSON array. So the JSON object, I'm sorry. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a method to pull in that data. So I'll just call it, let's make it private. Private void request tf2 news. There we go. All right, and the URL for this, I'm going to copy that. URL equals. There we go. All right, and API Buddy provides a singleton. You can just call API Buddy.getInstance. That provides you access to the singleton, and then you can call a method on the API Buddy singleton. So I'm going to call send get request. I'm going to tell it that we want to populate a TF2 news object, and I'm going to give it the URL. I'm going to give it a timeout of 30 seconds. I don't think it's really going to take that long. And then we're going to pass in a callback delegate, and it's going to have the a boolean for the status. What happened there? Google status. Let's see, what else do we have? We need a string for the error message if there's a message, and we need integer for the status code, and the actual object that it will populate, response object. There we go. All right. Actually, let's call this success instead of status. There we go. All right, so we'll say if success, do something else, debug.log. Actually, let's do this. I'm going to create an private void on GUI. This will just give us a button to press to actually request our TF2 news. So if GUI.button, I'm going to put it at 20 from the left, 20 from the top. We'll make it 100 wide and 50 tall. And request TF2 news. There we go. Request TF2 news. That'll give us a button to press to request the news. And then let's also just create a GUI element that will display our actual news. So I'm going to create a private variable here, private string output text. This is where we will display the text that we pull in from the API. All right, now I'm just going to do GUI.text area. Use a text area so that we can select the text if we want to. Let's see, 20 from the left. We'll do this time 100 from the top, and we'll make it 500 wide and 400 tall. That sounds good. And we will give it our output text content. All right, so now that we've got that output text set up, we can just, if there's an error, we'll just say output text equals could not pull TF2 news, and then we will give the error message. All right, hopefully it's successful. So in that case, we will initialize our output text to an empty string, and then we'll say output text. What do we want? The title. Let's make it look fancy. Let's see. Oh, one more thing that I forgot to do here. We need to reference our TF2 news object that we created. So TF2 news equals, we're just going to cast the response object to TF2 news. At this point, API Buddy has already populated the response object with the data from the web API. All right, so I'm just going to pull in the TF2 news title. I need the app news. Actually, we're going to do this for each, so we can show all of the news items. So for each TF2 news.news item in TF2 news.app. Let's see. Oh, here we go. News item in TF2 news app news.news items. Let's see. Output text. Make it fancy. Plus news item dot title. All right. we go. And then we'll put the URL in parentheses here. News item.url. And we also need to show the contents. Plus news item.contents. And we will give ourselves another couple extra lines just for extra spacing. And I think that's about it. Let's see. That looks good to me. I'm going to go ahead and save, and I will switch over to Unity, and we will see what happens when we click the button. All right, Unity is finished compiling. Let's click it. Okay. Oops, I didn't make my button large enough, but that's fine. You can see that it pulled in the TF2 news just fine, real quick and easy. That's about it. Thank you for watching, and just let me know if you have any questions about anything. I'm happy to respond and help out. Thank you.